Welcome to Curtis Goes Corner, coming to you from a secret underground base in occupied America. Hi folks, welcome back. And those of you that are new, welcome. Here we go. Michigan could put you in prison for misgendering. I'm not kidding. How in the world has the so-called LGBT plus community have such a stranglehold on the Democrat Party? Now, this is the state of Michigan. This is not some left-leaning, progressive, ultra-progressive city like Portland or Austin, Texas, or anywhere, San Francisco. This is the entire state of Michigan. Now, you read this story, this should alarm you. This is crazy. This is unbelievable. Let's read on. In Canada, misgendering an individual is considered a hate crime. Ever since the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Criminal Code was amended in 2017 to include gender identity and gender expression as protected classes. In 2019, a father in British Columbia was found guilty of family violence for not referring to his daughter by her preferred pronouns. You're saying, wow, John, that's Canada. They're whack jobs anyway. Well, let's read on. We can't write this off as Canadian craziness anymore. Exactly. A recently passed bill in Michigan, HB 4474, seeks to make it a felony to intimidate someone by using the wrong pronouns, also known as misgendering. According to the bill, intimidate means a willful course of conduct involving repeated or continuing harassment of another individual who would cause a reasonable individual to feel terrorized, frightened, or threatened, and what actually causes the victim to feel terrorized, frightened, or threatened. I want you to read this part again. Another individual, it causes a reasonable individual to feel terrorized, frightened, or threatened, and it actually causes the victim to feel terrorized. Reasonable person. So they continues to call me a cis male. I can get them in Michigan if I live there. This is nuts. The bill does not define harassment. Of course it doesn't, because that would be too specific. But defines gender identity or expression as having or perceiving as having a gender-related self-identity or expression, whether or not associated with an individual's assigned sex at birth. Now, I want to say, I don't own it anymore. I sold it 2 years ago. I had a convenience store in upstate New York in Binghamton in a fairly low-income area. And quite often, I had a trans woman come in the store, went by the name of Rachel, and we had hours and hours and hours of discussion. That individual was a reasonable person, even though I didn't agree with what that individual said. We had long philosophical discussions, and that individual never felt terrorized, never felt frightened or intimidated. It's amazing to me. That individual has since passed away of cancer, but that's besides the point. And the individual also said to me, you know, John, it's funny, because he knew I was a city councilman at the time, back in the early 2000s. And he used to see how the people at council meetings, when LGBTQ plus stuff come up, as a proclamation, don't do this, don't do that. I said, this is absolute nonsense. And of course, the tolerant people in the audience of that community screamed I was a miserable pig and all kinds of other stuff that you can't say on YouTube. But it was at a live public meeting, televised. And that individual came in the next day after that meeting and said, listen, I'm going to go down there and straighten those people out. And I said, no, that's okay. Maybe I should have let that person go down there. But anyway, make a long story short, so that way we don't get in trouble here on YouTube, said, since when do these organizations represent me? I must have missed that vote. It's incredible to me. It really is. In other words, the state literally wants to force citizens to affirm the gender identity of transgender people. If the bill becomes law and you don't affirm the gender identity of transgender or non-binary people, you risk a fine of $10,000 or as much as 5 years in prison. Here in New York, if you are sentenced longer than a year, you go to state prison. You don't go to the county jail prison. You go to state prison or real jail. That's why you'll see a lot of times judges will give a person a sentence of a year and a day. That means they're especially pissed at the individual. Those accused of misgendering could potentially get their sentence reduced if they submit to woke education, re-education camp. The bill states that a sentence can be reduced by no more than 20% if the defendant agrees to community service intended to enhance the offender's understanding of the impact of the offense upon the victim and wider community. Some of these individuals are so unstable that if they're misgendered, they will completely lose their... It's amazing to me. In a vote of 59 to 50, the bill was successfully passed by the Democrat-controlled State House and now moves to the Democrat-controlled State Senate, where it will likely pass, and inevitability of Governor Gretchen Whitmer will sign it. Those of you that are wondering, how can it be possible? Of the 109 that voted, how could 59 vote for this? How could Democrats, and a lot of them are not wacky Democrats, because they're scared to death. Because they're scared if they vote no and do the right thing on something like this, the progressives will come after them when they run for re-election. Will pound them relentlessly, will primary them to death, and drive them out of office. By the way, that's the exact same tactic that we used in state houses in the late 19-teens to pass prohibition. Slowly but surely, state house by state house, the prohibition people used that tactic. Letters, intimidation. Now, they didn't have any social media, but they used mail extensively. They primaried people to finally, the state legislators, the officials in the House and in the Senate in those states said, to hell with it. Let's vote for prohibition here. It's amazing to me. It's the exact same tactic. So Michigan throw you in prison if you refuse to use someone's preferred pronouns. If you're like me, you couldn't care less about what someone's pronouns are. So if you encounter a person who's biological male, you refer to them as such. She's a biological female, you do the same. Well, I'm sure that if the law passes, it'll immediately face challenges in the courts. The idea that such a bill could pass in a state house is disconcerting. You betcha it is. Whenever it is that has the power to do so, the radical left seems to not only ban certain forms of speech, but also compel speech. Frankly, this isn't new. And that's the caveat. Ban certain forms of speech, but compel speech. Compelling speech is way different than me standing in a public square and going F this and N that and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's not the same. Compelled speech is much, much different. It's insane. These people are just going way too far. Is the backlash going to happen? Eventually. The Supreme Court just decided on Friday that Colorado's anti-discrimination law effectively compelled speech by forcing a graphic designer to create a wedding websites for same-sex marriages against her religious beliefs. Of all the thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of graphic designers they could have picked, what they do is, very much like with bakeries, they'll pass hundreds of bake shops that will more than willing to do a cake for a same-sex marriage, but they'll drive hundreds of miles out of their way to go after the one or two people that won't. Same with this. You know how many graphic designers there are for websites just in the United States? There's hundreds of thousands, I would think. Part-time, full-time. Just pick one. Make no mistake about it. The radical left will keep trying things like this if we don't fight like hell to preserve a conservative majority in the Supreme Court. Free speech will be a relic of the past. This isn't about free speech in the Michigan law. This is about compelled speech. And there she is, Gretchen Whitmer. Remember the so-called kidnapping trial where a whole bunch of supposedly right-wing nuts were going to kidnap the governor and all that, and come to find out there was like 11 or 12 of them. 9 of them were FBI informants. What the hell's going on in Michigan? Michigan used to be a pretty reliable swing state. Do you think for a minute that the inner city in Detroit, the low-income areas in Detroit, give a good damn what your pronoun is? And I will bet you money, if a non-white individual is doing the things that this law prohibits, that person will never see 1 day in jail or $1 in fines. This is amazing to me. These people are cowards, but they want to keep their elected positions because the left is threatening them with primaries and just destroy their character and their name over one issue. Believe me, I know, because it was done to me in the early 2000s here in upstate New York. Ruined my business. But I held firm and I didn't buckle. This is scary stuff, folks. I'm telling you right now, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. This is nuts. Until the next time, goodbye and good luck.